The young couple, Jake and Emily, invested all their savings into a house that seemed like the perfect place to start a new life. However, soon after moving in, they began to notice strange things. The first warnings were mysterious noises in the walls and shadows flickering in the corners of rooms. Their once peaceful and cozy space, which they had worked so hard to create, seemed increasingly unsafe with each passing day. Noises in the walls, shadows flickering in their peripheral vision, all of it began to weigh heavily on their souls. Jake, being a skeptic by nature, initially tried to explain these phenomena rationally. He checked the house for hidden defects and convinced himself that it might just be the result of stress and adapting to a new place. But with each new manifestation of the paranormal, his confidence began to wane. Emily, on the other hand, was more inclined to believe in the supernatural. She began searching for answers in ancient legends and books on mysticism, trying to understand what exactly was haunting them in their own home. The couple spent countless hours discussing possible explanations and trying to find a way to overcome their fears. But the more they tried to ignore what was happening, the more convincing the signs became that something unknown and ominous lurked in their home. One night, Emily woke up from an unusual feeling of cold and fear, sensing something pulling her leg from under the bed. In horror, she began to scream and struggled to break free. Jake was awakened by her cries, but when he turned on the light, the creature vanished. He nervously checked under the bed but found no one there. With each passing day, the events became increasingly strange and menacing. Objects began moving on their own. Images on the walls changed without the owner's knowledge, and the air in the house grew heavier and more tense. Desperate to find an explanation for what was happening, Jake, at Emily's request, sought help from exorcists. They performed a cleansing ritual, hoping to drive the sinister presence out of the house. But their attempts only angered the spirit, and the situation became even more dangerous. One day, a wardrobe nearly fell on Jake as he searched for clothes. It landed just inches away from him. Later, as he descended the stairs from the second floor, the railings broke, and he narrowly escaped a fatal fall. It became clear that after the exorcist's visit, the spirit stopped playing and began to do serious harm. But what was strange was that Jake seemed to be its only target. Besides the incident with the bed, the spirit hadn't done anything to Emily. As each day passed, Emily grew more afraid, but her fear was not so much caused by the presence of the ghost as it was by her concern for Jake's life. While Jake was at work, she tried to find out where this spirit might have come from. Nearly half a century ago, a happy married couple, John and Elizabeth, lived in this house. They invested all their hopes and dreams into this home, hoping for many years of happiness. But fate had something else in store for them. One dark night, when John was at work, burglars broke into the house, and as a result of a terrible scuffle, Elizabeth died. John, after returning home and discovering what had happened, was devastated. His world crumbled, and his heart was torn apart by the loss of his beloved wife. 6 months later, he also died in an accident, but his death was shrouded in mystery. Emily concluded that the ghost haunting the house might be the restless spirit of Elizabeth, but Emily never managed to complete her investigation. One day, when Jake returned home, he discovered that Emily had vanished. He searched every corner of the house, but she was nowhere to be found. Fear and desperation gripped him, and he didn't know what to do. Naturally, he turned to the police, but they found no evidence indicating what might have happened to his beloved. But what was strange was that after Emily's disappearance, the spirit also vanished, as if it had never existed. However, this didn't last long, as a week later, Jake heard some noises outside, and when he looked out the window, he saw Emily. Her face was pale, as if she hadn't taken a single breath since her disappearance. But as soon as Jake tried to call out to her, she immediately fled into the darkness. He chased after her, but by the time he reached the street, her trail had vanished. Desperate to save his beloved, Jake turned to the exorcists once again. This time, they decided to perform a more powerful and profound ritual to permanently expel the sinister presence from the house. They entered the house together with Jake, and after some preparations, they began their rites. The air was filled with the scent of incense and holy water, and the sounds of ancient chants echoed throughout the house. Jake, standing aside, felt like a powerless witness to this battle. In his heart burned the fire of hope that his beloved could be saved from this nightmare. Suddenly, before them, appeared the image of Emily. But it wasn't Emily they knew. Her eyes were vacant and abyssal, as if no soul resided within them. Her face was contorted with fear and horror, and her hair was disheveled, as if living serpents were coiled around her. The exorcists were stunned by the horror of encountering this ominous specter. But it wasn't just her appearance that shocked them, it was also the words she spoke, unlike any human language. Her voice sounded like a demonic whisper, penetrating the depths of the soul and evoking indescribable terror in those present. They realized it was an illusion, created by the demon to intimidate and thwart their expulsion attempts. But despite the fear that engulfed them, the exorcists stood firm. They knew that their faith and the power of holy incantations could overcome any evil. As time passed, the battle took on darker shades. The ominous entity, hidden in the dark corners of the room, began to take shape. Its outline blurred like darkness, but sometimes unfamiliar contours flickered, resembling claws or reaching shadows. They stood face to face with the unknown, their voices piercing the air with powerful prayers and incantations. Their hands, bearing sacred symbols, trembled with tension, but their resolve remained unshaken. Evil fought against them, trying to confuse and overwhelm them. Dark shadows swirled around, attempting to ensnare them in their cold embrace. But they resisted. Their voices sounded strong and resolute, filling the room with light and purity and repelling persistent and relentless evil. Finally, after hours of struggle, evil began to gradually recede. The air in the room became clearer, and the tension diminished. In the unceasing battle of light and darkness, the air was filled with the scent of sulfur and incense, and prayers penetrated the deepest recesses of the dark space. The exorcists continued their prayers until the last signs of the sinister presence vanished. They emerged from this battle weary and exhausted, but with a sense of pride and relief. For long minutes afterward, they knelt in silence, realizing their victory over the evil that loomed over this house. When it was all over, the room was filled with peace and tranquility. Jake breathed a sigh of relief, realizing they had triumphed. He thanked them for their help and support. However, at that moment, something mysterious flickered in the corner of the room. It was a faint light, like a ghost, disappearing into the darkness. They exchanged glances but said nothing. When everything quieted down, a faint voice came from the basement. Rushing there, Jake found Emily frozen and tormented. She was rescued and taken to the hospital, but her condition remained dire. Psychologists said she had suffered trauma, but the nature of her ordeal was unimaginable. Unable to find rational explanations for what had happened, they concluded that Emily needed specialized treatment. Understanding that his place was by Emily's side no matter what, Jake cared for her in the hospital. He tried to be her rock and support during this difficult time, never losing hope for their future. While Emily underwent treatment, in the depths of the basement, Jake found an old diary that belonged to John. From it, he learned where this evil had come from. Desperate and unwilling to accept loss, John delved into the study of forbidden rituals and black magic. He sought ways to bring his beloved back to him, even if it meant delving into the darkest depths. In the end, out of desperation and a blind thirst for revenge, John made a deal with the demon. He promised to give his soul and life in exchange for bringing Elizabeth back to life. But the demon had no mercy. The day after the deal, when John returned home, he unexpectedly died in an accident. The demon, intent on fulfilling his part of the bargain, resurrected Elizabeth, but not as a living and loving spouse, but as an angry and vengeful spirit. Elizabeth became an instrument of the demon's dark power. She became an evil ghost, lurking in the dark corners of the house, trying to reclaim a living body and seeking revenge for her death. The dark energy of past suffering and evil enveloped the house, making it a place filled with horror and mystery. Elizabeth, possessed by the power of the demon, became the cause of fear and pain for anyone who dared to enter this house. After reading the diary and learning about this history, with each passing day, Jake realized more and more that the house they had bought was shrouded in the veil of past fears and suffering. Therefore, he decided to sell it and buy a new house by the lake. The new house was filled with light and fresh air, and Jake hoped that this new environment would help them start a new chapter in their lives. He dreamed that once Emily recovered, they could live here again, rediscovering happiness and peace.